Alrighty, folks, I am back, and I have pretty much finished up the jacket here. However, if you might notice, I've got some other things that actually go with the jacket. So I wanted to make sure that I did the jacket first, because what I'm actually going to do here is pull the weight paint from these for these items from the jacket itself. I'm gonna toggle my view here to be isometric, just because it prevents the camera from jumping around too much. Just like before, we are going to, in object mode, select our initial mesh that we want to weight paint to. We are going to shift click where we want to take the weight paint from, toggle over to weight paint mode, go weights, transfer weights, by name, nearest edge interpolated. I'm actually going to do nearest face interpolated. No, we'll go back to nearest edge interpolated. Once again, source layer selection by name, all of that. So first things first, we are going to want to remove any unneeded weight paint. This is actually a point, especially with the buttons behind the bag again. Especially with these buttons here, we are going to be using our third tool on our weight paint bar. We're going to be using the average tool, because each of these buttons we want to not deform too much when they move. Once again, we're going to be cleaning up any weight paint that we don't really need. I'm going to increase the radius here a little bit and average out the weight paint on any of these button faces. That way the whole button, if it has the same paint, should ideally deform in the exact same way relative to the bone that it is attached to. So we're just gonna use the average tool until these look like they're pretty much the same color on every associated vertex. I'm actually going to delete the weight paint. We don't really need the right side and the left side to interact with each other, so anytime we get paint that's on the wrong side, we're just gonna, nip that in the bud. We probably do not need that particular bone. I'm actually going to remove that vertex group entirely from either side, because logically it wouldn't affect the buttons. Now, there is something we could be using here. We could be using, if I had started out with it, a mirror modifier. It works for things. I usually use it on gloves and shoes. That way I only have to worry about one side. But I can never guarantee if a particular clothing mesh is going to be symmetrical. I mean, obviously you look up here at the lapel of the jacket, and it is not symmetrical. So I hesitate when I have a mesh that I know is not symmetrical in detailing. I usually refrain from using the mirror modifier or any kind of XY mirroring on a mesh like that. I just prefer to do it all by hand. I find I get better results that way, and you have less of a chance of something going wrong because there's a different number of vertices from the right side to the left side due to the different detailing. You know, just little things to kind of keep in mind. Get a little overzealous there. Okay, obviously we don't need any of the leg paint or the butt paint. I'm wondering why I ended up with the paint from gloves, but that's okay. We'll just... Probably because I hadn't hidden them. That's alright. We know we don't need that, so it's an easy thing to just delete those unneeded weight paints. There, we've got now our buttons. And actually, I'm going to take a moment to go back to object mode because we now have our bag, and I'm going to hide everything except the two items I want to work with. So I'm going to select the object I want to weight paint first, shift click the jacket, that's where I want to take the weight paint from. I'm going to go into weight paint mode. Once you get used to this, it's really, you almost memorize it. But there we go. We have now copied our weight paints, which means we can actually turn some things back on. Let's turn gloves back on, boots. I've had the shorts on this whole time, but they weren't involved, so I'm going to test some of this weight paint real quick before we do any kind of base editing for this particular... Actually, we should probably remove some of the unneeded weight paint first before we do that. We will not need the arms and the hands for this particular item. Shoulders, not well, maybe the right shoulder. We'll see how that behaves when we are testing it. But generally speaking, most of these will not have a profound effect. Don't need the leg paint or the butt paint. We don't even need the stomach paint because this is high enough up on our model. Let's start doing some testing just to make sure it behaves properly. Once again, that's armature body. We want to make sure we're in pose mode. I'm actually going to select pose position. Where I put the arms down earlier. I'm actually going to lift this one up a little bit. Just because we're testing the weight paint now and we want to make sure. Most important thing for me with this particular mesh is I want to make sure that if we shrink the tatas this way, it will behave properly. And we have some deforming. I think I could clean up the jacket a little bit more. But that's okay. Move that back. But that's okay, that's what all the testing is for. I'm starting to think for the jacket it may be a matter of some of the movement did not help us. I mean, a lot of it's also... Oh, I probably want to be using the blur tool, not the average tool. Here's another tool that we can use, Smear. Smear can be pretty useful if we want to kind of drag paint from one area to another. It basically is as it sounds. You're smearing paint around. Sometimes it's a little risky to use because it will take a pretty decent amount of paint from one sector to another. That's why I don't usually use that particular tool. Also, cleaning up is always good. Usually the automatic weights will give you more influence than you need. So sometimes you want to turn that down. That's also a great way you can smear less weight paint in and then just kind of smooth it out with your blur tool. I still have these two vertices here. I'm going to use our trick again where I went into edit mode, if you remember, and I selected a vertex and used our end menu to check things out. We have a pretty substantial amount of influence from the spine on that one. So that tells me that that might be what we're dealing with. Let me actually go and make spine 2, just right here, our active one. Switch back to weight paint mode and let's see what happens if I smear some of this downwards. Yep. Looks like we just have a little bit too much influence in this area. Gonna erase some. And then if you notice it's kind of getting a bit janky again, we're gonna blur the edges here. And notice we're already starting to look a lot flatter in the chest region. Most of the time, you do not want to be flatter. Most of the time, you want to make sure, just, make sure that things look good. It also tells me that I might want to increase the influence in this region. With that, let me try another thing. I have, obviously, this being a 9S, I have a certain preset that I imagine people will be using in mind. It's good to know, what you think the people who are your eventual users will be going through. When they end up using your mod. Also, when you're painting, 0.1, 0.15 is actually a pretty decent spot to start. There we go. That looks a little nicer. The buttons are gonna be a little floaty, if only because I made them two separate meshes. Buttons can be kind of hard, especially when they are a separate item from the mesh itself. But I'm thinking our item looks a little bit better. So let's go back to the bag, which we were going to influence. We want to make sure that it is behaving as we want. We notice some deformation here. Mind you, I didn't subdivide this particular mesh. If only because I didn't entirely feel like it needed it. But you know, you learn. I'm actually gonna click average on this. Maybe even a little bit of smear. We don't want too much influence, but we still want influence, you know? As you can see, you still get those parts where it's a little janky, but the more that we, you know, make these values a little bit more consistent, you notice the less deforming we have. Mune00 is going to be your base bone for the chest, pretty much. So a lot, because it's this one all the way back there, it's the one that everything else is parented to when it comes to the chest. It's a pretty good place to start. This is on the right, actually. I'm going to delete this weight paint off the bag. Like, Mune left. Where am I getting these mixed up? Let me Control-C that. I think I'm getting my rights and lefts mixed up. It happens. I am, unfortunately, only human. Oh, I mean, I'm a pup, but I'm, you know. Yeah, just kind of clicking around, rubbing around, normalizing. Technically is a different thing, but making this less I'm going to now go back to our armature here. Oop. It's object mode we want. Pose mode. I'm going to move our shoulder. Let me see how much it'll influence the back. I can probably erase the weight paint for the shoulder off of this portion. It's not going to matter as much for the right shoulder as it will for the left shoulder, where we have to have this part of the lapel move with it. If he's shrugging, let me check the back of that to see how that's working. Yeah, we're gonna wanna erase it off of the bag itself. This is where being artistic comes into knowing how to weight paint. You want to know how the clothing is going to move with the particular item in question. So, you know, erasing some of this influence here, aside from these key areas, actually gonna close my end menu, which the reason why it's called an end menu is because you can open it up and close it with the simple click the end key. Now that we've cleaned up this weight paint, why don't we take a look back at our armature. Pose mode. Oop. Gonna click on this bone. He's shrugging, and now we have just the effect of the straps and not the bag. We've deleted the influence from this particular bone, so now he can shrug and it doesn't move the bag around. Other important bones to note for an item like this is we're gonna have him bow. this part doesn't move as much as we want, so we'll want to increase the influence there. It's kind of funny because we are worrying almost more about the bag than the rest of the mesh, but that sometimes is just how the cookie crumbles. Well, we found the bone we want, spine 3. So let us actually now use another one of our tools, sample weight. So I want to sample the weight from up here. I'm going to click on this vertex. So now that my draw weight is going to be that same amount. So I'm going to start kind of putting it around here. So as you now see, the bag is now moving with that part of the body more. And it looks like I have some. Gotta love when Blender does that. I still have some weight paint smoothing to do in the chest region, but because I just moved spine 3, we know exactly where we want to smooth that weight paint. So let's switch back to the jacket. We want spine 3. And actually, whoop! Even I make mistakes. And it's okay if you do too. The most important thing to notice when you make mistakes is just learning how best to fix them. Let's actually, usually I said like 1.5 is pretty good. We have some work to do here. But this is also why, working on various places on the body is so important. Because you never know when you're going to run into an issue or where you're going to run into an issue. Let's see what else we can do. And this seems to still be a spine 3 shoots. Your body. Let's hit the rest position and actually take a look at this whole region that's just not influenced at all. There's particular bone. Let's test it again. Still pretty not great. There is a trick that we can always do when we have problems like this. However, this is so not smooth, I hesitate to actually do that. Sometimes, if you have clipping that you just can't get rid of, you can delete parts of the body on the top. Now, you can only do this at the top because when you're finally bundling the clothing, the top actually gets put together with the top item. Now you might ask, why does that happen? It's just the way it's coded. You bundle the whole body together with the item in question. I'm starting to wonder if my problem isn't because we've got all this weight painting on the side here and none in the middle, so I'm gonna smear. Another great use of our smear tool. Smear and then blur. And then let's go back to armature body, put in the pose position again. I am thinking that's looking a little bit better. So let's rest. And paint. And pose. It's getting there. Now we can probably, seeing as you no longer see nearly as much of a crease. It's actually... Whoop! No, not Shift A, Control Z. It's always a matter of this and that. That's, I think, what I did was... Now, you'll probably go back and forth for hours with a mesh. I know I do, especially. Just to make sure that the weight painting is right. And it's an interesting thing. There is, as long as it looks right in the end, there's really no way to go too wrong with your weight paint. As long as you don't have too much clipping or folding in particular areas that are unintentional. The key is to kind of know what you want the end product to look like, more or less, and just kind of get there through using your tools and whatnot. It's a process. But I know once you get there, it's a lot less daunting. You start to feel like things come more natural to you. And yeah, it takes a while. As you can see, I'm still clumsy sometimes and delete or do things I don't intend to. But overall, in the end, it's about learning how to use the tools given to you. It's about learning what feels right, what looks right. How are you going to achieve the je ne sais quoi that you want in your work? And I believe that anyone can learn how to do that. Mastering the tools is absolutely the most difficult part, just because there is so much out there and there are so many ways to do the same things. I'm still learning ways when I'm fitting that I can sculpt better. I'm learning that, you know, I could use this tool or that tool and come up with the same end goal. Just sometimes some methods are a little faster than others. And that's okay. As you're learning, it is okay to go at your own pace. You do not need to feel beholden to doing things super fast or learning everything in one day or one night. It will be a learning process. There is a learning curve. But as long as you're willing to keep going at it, and as long as you're willing to stay passionate and positive, and more than that, as long as you're willing to ask for help when you need it, I think anyone can do what I do. It's just a matter of having the drive and patience to do so. With that, I've got more work to do, but I think this tutorial is over. I'm sure that if you've seen this video, which I'm planning to release once this mod is done, you've already seen this particular outfit in action. This is just a taste of how I did it. If you would like to support me, I have my Buy Me a Coffee, and at the time this video is being recorded, I don't have a Patreon, though it is in the works for something I'm going to do, so I hope that you'll help support me there so I can keep supporting you guys, both with the things that I make and maybe with these tutorials too. Until next time.